Hello everyone, my name is Moji. You're watching a Bitcoin Bubble News channel. That's why I think you should leave the country if the government puts a tax on Bitcoin. If they're going to tax the capital gains, I think you should handle it yourself so you don't have to turn it over very often, if at all. And I think you should move to that country if they made it legal money. You should turn around and go the other way. In a new interview at Bitcoin Park, Michael Saylor talks about how Bitcoin affects government and taxes and how complicated it is. He talks about how important cryptocurrency is in today's business world. Bitcoin is worth about $59,000 at the time of the talk, up almost 8% in the last 24 hours but down 7% over the last week. There are currently over 19 million Bitcoins in circulation. Now click on the link below to get your special copy for a little less than $10. If the ducks are quacking, feed the ducks is a saying on Wall Street. That's what they want. There's another group of people. They want to own a piece of a public company. The spot ETF can't be bought. They can't. That's it. It goes against their rules. They are fired. They can't do it. Why don't they? But you do question the world, right? Back then, the world had a lot of money, and it could have taken 20 years to get the money together. I need to spend the money now. If you are an entrepreneur, my main point is that you can make a security that a business person can use to get Bitcoin known. You sell public debt or stock and buy Bitcoin if you're a public company. You'll sell private loans or equity and buy Bitcoin if you're private, if you can't get money. Then you need to work really hard and be lucky. It's also hard. Sometimes there will be a Zuckerberg, and there will be some big steps forward, but it's not easy. So the best thing to do is not work yourself to death. My advice is to keep in mind that there is $450 billion in capital in bonds, real estate, and other traditional investments from the 20th century. There are a trillion. That's 450 trillion in those things. 1 trillion Bitcoins are out there. You ought to be the one who brings the next $1 trillion from the old world to the new. To do this, you need to sell stocks to raise money to buy Bitcoin. You figure it out. What do you do to fix things? Hold it for them, or buy it for them to remove the risk of instability and downside. Then you can solve the compliance problem. A Shanghai ETF is the only way for Chinese billionaires to buy Bitcoin. If they don't, they will go to jail. Okay, what you do is solve that problem. It's not as good as living with yourself. It's not as good as the original Bitcoin, but that's just a point of view. If you have $10 billion to spend, you could buy $1 billion this way, go to jail, or not buy any at all. The world isn't perfect. That's why it's called Earth and not heaven. What is the resistance when you're making a transaction? That's the real question. It also comes from a solid source. For instance, what do I think about gold as a form of money? I don't think it's good because it's hard to split and send by mail. You can see that trading gold at a high velocity costs a lot of energy. That's why it died. But what do I think about Apple stock? Use as a form of payment. You're just now getting into politics. In a place where Apple stock was legal currency, it would be better than gold. If I can send it to you and you can send it back to me in an instant with no fees, then yes, Apple stock is better than gold. What do I think about the dollar as a money that can be used for transactions? I believe I do not need to account for sending it back and forth 1,000,000 times a day because I do not have 1,000,000 chargeable events. If I send a capital asset in the US, whether it's a corporate bond, an equity, or Bitcoin, while you're in the US right now, I'm moving it a lot, which is an accounting event and a tax event. If you do the math, everything just costs 10 or 20% more. So I don't mind if it's Satoshis on Lightning if we're talking about El Salvador, where it's legal tender and I can move it back and forth 100 times a month without any accounting or tax issues. I think the friction will start to show when it costs $3 to make a trade with Satoshis. It's getting too rough. In this case, I don't like it on the bottom. On the second level, I like it. But I would tell anyone that if they had a certain amount of money, they should keep 95% of it in the capital account and the other 5% in a local checking account. I believe that the government can destroy any wealth through tax policy, like if they want to destroy it right now. The best way to handle taxes, for example, is to treat legal tender like cash and not tax it. It's tax-free to hold on to and move, and you can do either at any time. Which is better, capital income or property? What is the most recent and best property tax? It's like you have it, and I want 1% of it. You know what? I want 1% of the market value every year, no matter how well you trade it. And in the US, that's the land tax. It takes your money away after 35 to 40 years. As we just heard, Michael Saylor talk strongly about how Bitcoin could change the world. Now, let's look more closely at how he sees it going forward. Saylor challenges common beliefs by giving strong reasons for the growing interest in cryptocurrencies. This talk focuses on important things to remember, like how changes in regulations could affect Bitcoin's role in financial freedom. Now let's hear what Michael Saylor has to say about how digital currencies are changing. It's a good sign that everyone is talking about it. The time for Overton has moved. A year ago, no one would talk about it. Now, Robert F. Kennedy has talked about it. A lot of politicians are talking about it. I think we should start with the talk. I don't expect too much. I think we should all not expect too much. But keep in mind that when the government talks about having something, they make it seem legitimate. What they're not talking about, though, is taking it away from you. So they sold it quickly when they didn't plan to own it, like when the German government thought it might go to zero. There is a harmful story going around that it is not an advantage, it is a crime, and it will be wiped out. And you need to build a strong base if you want to move forward. Because of this, I believe that once the government talks about it, people and small businesses will feel safe enough to move in. They're going to move first and lead, right? It's going to be hard to work with the government, and there will be a lot of fighting. But I believe the people and families will move. I believe it is much safer to talk about it in the board meeting if the government is thinking about it. Okay, when people in the office ask me, I can say, yeah, MicroStrategy is working, but guess what? These are all the leaders who have this bill. The question is whether I will be fired if I suggest it. I believe the Overton window is moving. There's no way I think the government will buy a lot of Bitcoin tomorrow and wire it to me. I believe you should not believe that. I believe. Over the next 4 years, the government will start to take a stand. It's likely to appear out of the blue. It's likely to be someone you didn't expect. It will be good. In general, though, I think this will go on for 4 years. Before this one, there were 4 more, and then there were 4 more. Yes, I just got off stage where I gave a speech in which I said that buying 500,000 Bitcoin would be a good way for the US to keep up with the 10% rule. The best plan is for them to buy 1 million. They should buy 2 million as part of the double maxi plan. And for the US, the triple max plan is to buy 4 million Bitcoins over the next 4 years. For 18% of the supply, they would have been happy, and if they did that, they would pay off their debt and have a huge profit. And my example is, if you want to be successful as a nation-state, you need to have the ability to defend your useful property. So the British Empire grew because they lived on an island that was hard to attack. After 1066, no one got there, and that island became industrialized. After that, they got the colonies, which were safe, useful land. The US became powerful because it is surrounded by water on 3 sides: the Pacific, the Atlantic, the frozen tundra to the north, and the desert to the south. It is easy to protect and good for business. What do? We did buy land in Louisiana, though. Jefferson bought 27% of the land for $15 million. Alaska was bought by Seward for $7 million. 2/8 of the land is owned by the US government. We own about 18% of the gold in the world here in the US, so scarce property that you want, but buy useful property that you can protect. This means that if hundreds of trillions of dollars are moving to the internet, then Bitcoin is going to make real estate in Siberia, China, and Africa worthless. Also, why would you want to